Public Image Limited, sometimes shortened to PIL, are a British rock band formed in 1978 by John Lydon. So he was in the Sex Pistols using the stage name Johnny Rotten. And when he left, he formed this other band, PIL, which were conceived as being an experimental rock band. Over the years, they have become more mainstream. They've had a lot of member changes, except for John Lydon, and they have produced 10 studio albums. Hi, my name's Dan. So this was the first album by Public Image Limited, and it's my first encounter with this album. And I am assuming, although I don't know for sure, that the name of the band has come effectively from the name of this record. The name of this album has come from the track Public Image, which I believe was the first track that was recorded for the album. I might have got that wrong. Apologies if so. You may well have seen the score um, on the listing for the video, so it's probably not going to come as any surprise to you that I didn't like this album. Um, it is regarded as being an influential post-punk album. I'm guessing that it may well be the first album that was labelled as post-punk. Um, Partly because it might have been the first time a high-profile punker goes in a somewhat different direction. It has in the production of this quite a bit in common with dub, which was a derivative of reggae that came out started to come through towards the end of the 70s, and so what it has in common with that is a very spacious feel, with use of fluttering echo. It's got a thick, deep bass in it. In fact, I would say don't listen to this album if you want to listen to it on cheap laptop speakers, because you'll lose the best bit, which is the bass, which is played by a guy called Yah Wobble or Jar Wobble, who I have heard of in terms of other bands. I hadn't realised he was in PIL. With that as well, there are drums, and they're sometimes quite driving. There's one track that's more of a kind of, I think it might be a drum machine, and there's quite echoey guitar chords, and everything then, apart from the bass, sounds like it's got a lot of reverb on it and is pulled down in the mix to give it a lot of space. And then the other thing you've got here is John Lydon, who is shouting or semi-singing, spouting things kind of over the top. So having mentioned dub, and the kind of the sound of the production is like dub, but it's more like punk rock in the actual music. It's certainly more like kind of rock. In some ways, though, it's very repetitive. Again, that's like dub, and it's almost trancey at times. So I didn't find it musically attractive. I found it quite annoying. Now, I do several of these reviews in an evening sometimes, and I've just a couple of albums ago reviewed Purity Ring. I didn't find it musically as annoying as I did Purity Ring. I just found it pretty dull. I also found I felt like it was a bit of a cheap attempt at being different. And I think my first reaction to it was similar to some other critics' first reaction, which is that it's just not that interesting and not that great musically. Now, in retrospect, some of those have changed their appraisal of this, and saying it's more of a pivotal album for post-punk. I don't know enough about post-punk to be able to comment on that. So I did have a minor grudging respect for John Lydon. I'm afraid I've lost most of that from listening to this album. So about 50% of why I don't like this album is, well, I'd say maybe about 25% is excuse myself, is the sound of it. About 25% of the feeling is the feeling that John Lydon is so self-obsessed that he feels like he can put out anything, and that people are going to want it because it's him, and because naturally, if it's him, it's hugely significant. And I feel like he's pulling off a great rock and roll swindle again, or trying to. But 50% of the reason why I dislike this album so much is a pair of songs called Religion and Religion 2. I say songs, the first one's not a song, it's the lyrics from the second one, done as a spoken word poem. And this is a song that was rejected by the rest of the Sex Pistols when he presented it to them. And Malcolm McLaren, as their manager and promoter, said that it was uh, basically not doable. It would put people off, and it did cause quite a lot of reaction against it. And it's called Religion, as I've already said, and basically I would describe it as being creedist and blasphemous. So some anti-religion songs are commentary on issues about that people have encountered with organised religion, and I think they can be fair comment. Some of them are about their personal views uh, on whether there is a God or there isn't a God, or aspects of that. And again, I think that's fair comment. This, in my opinion, paints all Christians as bad people, liars and worse, and has direct attacks on God and Jesus. Now that might not offend you. I actually find it offensive because I'm a Christian. So sorry about that. I don't know why I'm apologising for that. I support his right for freedom of speech. But I would also say that anybody who has a voice and has the public ear has a responsibility for the messages that they give. And that is why I feel like I can't duck out of objecting to this, because if I let it pass, then I feel like I'm not using the opportunity to say, I don't agree with him. Also, I would say it is hate speech, what he's doing here. Um, Also, I'm going to say John Lydon in this song seems like he's trying to claim some kind of moral high ground, and John Lydon trying to do that, I would say, is laughable. So I'm sorry, John, if you're watching this. I'm not a fan of this at all. I'm not alone. There was a fair amount of controversy. The album was never released in America. Now, apparently, that was more to do with the musical style than this particular track. It was withdrawn in Malta, of all places, because of the controversy over this track. So I don't normally object this strongly to stuff, especially if it's not rap. Rap, sometimes I do get quite wound up about the messages that they're giving. And in this message really soured it for me. The last track, however, there is one track on here that I kind of mildly enjoyed a bit, which is why this has actually got 2.8 as a higher mark than I would have given it otherwise. Fodder Stomp is an unusual track. It's got the same kind of feel, but it's got more of a kind of very repetitive drumming, which I think is either a loop or a drum machine. And it's got John Lydon and apparently Yah Wobble talking in silly falsettos, a bit like the Monty Python Pepper Pot, the women, we're talking like this. And that was mildly amusing. Apparently, when it was put forward to the record company, they were kind of somewhat bemused by it and didn't think it was worth including on the album. I think it was, because I think it's the only one that's even remotely worth listening to on this album. So I hated it. And I want to know what you think, so please do let me know by leaving a comment in the comments, especially if you love it. I'd love to know why. And that's it from me for now.
Be bland, be dull, be boring, be really, really, nothing, void, zilch,